What if one of the most famous horror movies ever made was actually cursed? Not in a metaphorical way, not in a fun marketing kind of way, something darker. Because when you start looking into what happened to the cast of Poltergeist, it stops feeling like coincidence pretty quickly. When Poltergeist came out in 1982, it wasn't just another horror movie, it was a massive success. But what made it different was how normal it felt. This wasn't some abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. It was a suburban home, a family, kids, TV in the living room. Everything about it felt familiar, which made what happened in the movie feel like it could happen to you. And maybe that's part of why what happened behind the scenes feels even more unsettling. At its core, Poltergeist is about a family whose home becomes invaded by spirits. At first, it's small things, objects moving, strange occurrences, but then it escalates, and fast. Eventually, their young daughter, Carol Ann, becomes the center of it all, communicating through the television, saying those now iconic words, "They're here." And from that point on, everything spirals. Now, this is where things shift. Because not long after the film was released, something very real happened. Dominique Dunne, who played the older sister in the movie, was murdered. She was only 22 years old, and she was strangled by her ex-boyfriend outside of her own home. And just like that, the film became connected to something horrific in real life. On its own, this is a tragedy, but it's not a curse, not yet. Then there's Heather O'Rourke, the little girl, the voice behind "They're here." She quickly became the face of the franchise, and everything seemed fine until it wasn't. At just 12 years old, Heather suddenly became very sick. What was initially misdiagnosed as something minor turned out to be a severe intestinal condition. And before doctors could intervene, she passed away. Suddenly, unexpectedly. And now, two members of the same film were gone. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. Because during filming, specifically the pool scene, real human skeletons were used. Not props, actual skeletons. At the time, it was apparently cheaper than creating fake ones, which is already uncomfortable. And this is the part where the story shifts from unsettling to something a little harder to ignore. Because using real human skeletons in film isn't just a strange production choice. What does it actually mean to use human remains like that? Throughout history, human bones haven't just been objects. They've been used in rituals, burials, ceremonies meant to honor the dead, or in some cases, to interact with something beyond. In certain traditions, bones were believed to carry energy, not in a dramatic movie-style way, but as something that still held a connection to the person they once belonged to. There has always been an understanding that human remains deserve a certain level of respect, a boundary. So when you take something like that, something that once belonged to a living person, and you put it in a swimming pool on a movie set under bright lights for entertainment, it feels like crossing a line. Even if it was legal, even if it was common at the time, there's something about it that just feels wrong. And that feeling matters, because horror at its core is about boundaries being crossed. Things that shouldn't happen, happening. Things that shouldn't be touched, being disturbed. A film about restless spirits and disturbed graves uses actual human remains. You're not just telling that story anymore, you're participating in it. And maybe nothing comes from that. Maybe it's just a strange, uncomfortable detail that people latch onto later. But if you believe that intention matters, or that objects can carry meaning, or even just emotional weight, then it's not hard to see why this decision sticks with people. Because it turns the question from, was this movie cursed? into something a little more uncomfortable. Should that line have been crossed at all? And it doesn't stop there. Other cast members experience strange or tragic events. Now, none as widely known as the first two, but enough to keep the conversation going. And once people start looking for patterns, they tend to find them. So let's break it down. Option 1. This is all just coincidence. Tragic, yes, but ultimately unrelated events that happen to be tied to the same film. When multiple tragedies happen around the same project, especially one dealing with death, spirits, and the unknown, it starts to feel like more. Option 2. There's something psychological happening. We're wired to look for patterns, to connect the dots, to turn random events into meaningful stories because it helps us make sense of things that don't make sense. But then there's option 3. And this is the one people don't like to say out loud. That maybe something about this production crossed a line. And whatever that line was, it didn't stay contained. Horror movies are supposed to stay on screen. That's the agreement. You watch them, you get scared, and then you go back to your normal life. But sometimes, the stories behind the movies are more unsettling than anything that was scripted. And Poltergeist might be one of those movies. Not because we know something was wrong, but because we can't prove that it wasn't. So what do you think? Are cursed films real? Or are we just really good at turning tragedy into something more?